Early in the morning at Izutsu Printing Company, the company president was scolding a newcomer who had already been working there for half a year but was late again. Grabbing him by the necktie, she lifted him a full foot off the ground. Her outbursts were such a common occurrence that the other employees didn't even try to intervene, though their nervous glances and stiff postures made it clear they were terrified. That's when Kenichi, the section chief of the company, stepped in. He reminded the president that it was time for the board meeting and assured her that he would handle the newcomer from here. Reina, the president, finally let go of the young man, her voice cutting through the tense air. She reminded him that in the printing business, even the smallest delay could be a matter of life and death, and that being new was no excuse when clients were involved. With that said, she pivoted sharply on her heel and strode off. As she walked away, she ordered the others to return to their tasks, and the office quickly settled back into motion. Later that night, on his way home, Kenichi found himself reflecting on her words. She wasn't wrong. Deadlines really did mean everything in their line of work. Still, he couldn't help but think that young people nowadays often lacked motivation, and that such a harsh tone would only push them to quit even faster. Then again, Reina herself was only 24. She had taken over suddenly after her father, the former president, passed away. Her youth wasn't an excuse, but not everyone could shoulder what she had. Kenichi, lost in thought, had wandered farther than usual on his way home. Realizing he had missed his turn, he found himself near a small park. There, under the dim glow of a streetlight, he noticed Reina slumped on a bench, drunk and crying uncontrollably. She was venting into the night, lamenting the weight of running a company, the endless need to fix problems, and the frustration of employees who treated their work carelessly. Overcome by emotion, she broke down further, declaring she wanted to abandon her responsibilities altogether and regress into being a baby, even going so far as to make baby-like noises. Kenichi approached cautiously, shocked to see her in such a vulnerable state. It was a stark contrast to the iron-fisted president he knew at work, and he realized just how much strain she must have been carrying alone. When Reina finally noticed him, her drunken mind seemed to mistake him for Tamatsu from middle school, failing to recognize who was actually standing before her. As he debated whether to quietly leave her be, Reina's behavior grew more erratic. She began unbuttoning her blouse, heedless of her surroundings. Startled, Kenichi quickly stepped in, shielding her with his bag to prevent a scene, worried that her reckless state might draw the wrong kind of attention in a public place. Kenichi knew he couldn't leave her like this. Reluctantly, he sat down beside her on the bench, deciding he would make sure she got home safely. Reina, still swaying from the alcohol, clumsily offered him a can of beer before breaking down into tears again. Through her sobs, she admitted how exhausting it was to keep pretending she had everything under control, to act like some untouchable company president, when, in truth, she was still so young. She recalled overhearing one of her employees talking behind her back, and in a fit of temper, she had punished him with a cobra twist. She admitted that she had always been short-tempered, and when she snapped, things just happened. But Kenichi couldn't help thinking to himself that a cobra twist doesn't just happen. Reina went on, explaining that she was doing everything she could to keep her father's company alive in her own way. She confessed how deeply she feared being looked down on because of her age, which was why she forced herself to be strict, even harsh. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she felt she could never live up to her father's example. In a broken voice, she wondered aloud if she was even cut out to run a company at all. Kenichi listened quietly before finally speaking, assuring her that it wasn't true. He told her that despite her youth, she took the company more seriously than anyone, and that kind of dedication, especially at her age, was genuinely remarkable. She had been carrying the weight of the presidency on her shoulders and still managed to lead the company forward. Someone out there, he reminded her, could see her efforts for what they truly were, and because of that, he urged her she should keep going with everything she had. Kenichi spoke with quiet certainty, assuring her that he would always be there to support her. The words seemed to catch Reina off guard. Her cheeks flushed as she stammered, wondering aloud if he was trying to hit on her. Flustered, she ducked her head in embarrassment, questioning how he could already know her so well when they had only just met today, and without even knowing each other's names. Gathering her courage, she turned to face him directly and suggested that they should start out as friends first. Kenichi was taken aback, scrambling to explain that this wasn't his intention at all. But before he could finish, her face drifted closer to his, her expression softening as though she were about to kiss him. Instead, she collapsed against his chest, fast asleep. Kenichi let out a breath of relief, silently thanking the heavens that she had only passed out. Looking down at her resting peacefully, he quietly commended her for working so hard today. He gathered her in his arms and carried her toward her home. The next day, Reina summoned Kenichi to her office and asked if the newcomer had shown up late again. Kenichi, relieved that she seemed to remember nothing from the previous night, calmly reported that the young man had been 5 minutes late. With a scowl, Reina told him to punch the offender as punishment. Kenichi, of course, refused, leaving her frustrated, leaning back in her chair, wanting to just drink right now to unwind. Her thoughts drifted, and she began to wonder how she had managed to get home the night before. She vaguely recalled someone comforting her, though the memory was hazy. A small, curious thought crossed her mind. If she went back to the park tonight, would she see that person again? Early in the morning, Reina was at it again, scolding her employees for being too lax. She declared that if they lacked motivation, they might as well go to the park and play on the swings instead of wasting time at work. The staff whispered among themselves. The younger employees muttered nervously about how terrifying she was, especially since she was the same age as many of them. The older employees, on the other hand, quietly admitted that her drive was admirable, though they wished she would ease up every once in a while. Ever since her father's sudden passing, Reina had taken over the company at just 24. Her perfectionism created a wide gap between her and her employees. Watching her now, Kenichi couldn't help but recall the drunken mess he had seen at the park. If only the employees could glimpse that side of her, perhaps the distance between them would shrink. Then again, he knew no one would believe him if he tried to tell them. Reina's sharp gaze suddenly cut through the whispers. She demanded that they stop murmuring during the morning meeting and challenged them to speak up if they had something to say. As she was about to conclude, she noticed the newcomer, Fujioka, dozing off. Her temper snapped, and in an instant, she had him in a chokehold. Kenichi rushed in, prying her off before things went too far. He cradled the gasping Fujioka, urging him to hang in there, while Reina stormed out of the room in anger. But instead of fear, something else stirred in Fujioka. Struggling for breath, he confessed that it was the first time a girl his age had ever put him in a chokehold, and that something deep inside him had just awakened. Kenichi stared at him in disbelief and muttered flatly that he should put it back to sleep. Later that night, Kenichi found himself drawn back to the park, uneasy with the thought that Reina might have wandered there again after the morning's incident. As he turned toward the swings, something struck him square in the face, a flying heel. He stumbled back in pain, only to spot the culprit. There was Reina, drunk once again, venting her frustrations as she pumped her legs on the swing, carelessly kicking her shoes into the night. Kenichi winced. It seemed the stress from the morning meeting had followed her here. He also realized he had never actually seen an adult so energetically using a swing before, and the sight gave him the uneasy feeling that he was intruding on something he wasn't meant to witness. In the end, his concern mattered more than his hesitation. He stepped closer and called out to her. This time, Reina immediately recognized him. She leapt from the swing and stumbled forward, throwing her arms around him. Pressing against his chest, she sobbed that she missed him and was so happy he had come all the way here just to see her. Kenichi froze, stunned not only by her words but by the overwhelming closeness of her embrace. Through her tears, she confessed that everyone whispered behind her back, even though she was trying her hardest. It became clear she still didn't truly recognize who she was clinging to, speaking as though he were someone else entirely. Reina pressed closer, her breast against his chest, and asked if the bump on his head had been caused by her stray heel earlier. Flustered, Kenichi assured her it wasn't her fault, gently placing his hands on her shoulders to ease her back, trying to put a bit of distance between them. Reina wandered back to the swing and began spilling her frustrations about the morning meeting. The juniors were frightened of her, the seniors dismissed her as a joke. Kenichi tried to listen, but the steady squeak of the swing and her drifting words made it difficult to catch everything. He simply agreed that her day had indeed been a disaster. Swinging higher, she cried out for another beer, only to realize her hands were already occupied. Kenichi, sipping from his own can, thought quietly to himself. From the employee's perspective, Reina must seem like someone who had swooped in out of nowhere, carrying a title she hadn't earned in their eyes. She was starting from zero when it came to trust, and worst of all, she had no one truly at her side. When she noticed his drink, Reina demanded a sip for herself, but Kenichi refused, pointing out that she was still swinging. She sulked, until suddenly her momentum slowed and her expression twisted in discomfort. The combination of alcohol and motion was catching up to her. Alarmed, Kenichi rushed to her side. Tears welled in her eyes as she gripped the chains tightly. Between sobs, she cried out, asking why things had turned out this way, why her father had to die. Kenichi was struck silent, letting her voice the pain she kept buried from everyone else. She admitted how overwhelming it was to manage the company, how useless she felt, and how all she seemed capable of was putting people into sleeper holds. Kenichi couldn't help but think to himself that if she could manage as well as she could choke, the company would be thriving already. Still, her words hit him hard. Beneath her composed, fearsome exterior, she was only 24, a daughter who had suddenly lost her father and been thrust into carrying the weight of his legacy. The burden she shouldered alone was unimaginable. For the first time, Kenichi truly wondered what he could do to ease it. Gathering his resolve, he called her name and told her once more that he would always be by her side. His sincerity caught her off guard. He continued, assuring her that no one ever got it right on the first try and that it was okay to take things one step at a time. He admitted he was just passing through her life and didn't know how much he could really do, but promised that if she needed someone, whether to vent, to complain, or simply to speak her mind, he would be there. Every night if necessary, anywhere she needed him, only if she okay with it. Reina's tears softened into a smile. She told him she would hold on to his words and that she would be waiting for him here every day. Then, with sudden energy, she declared it was swing time and demanded he push her. Kenichi faltered, unsure if he should really indulge her in such a childish request, but her persistence wore him down. Before long, he found himself pushing her gently, the two of them like father and daughter playing under a star-filled sky. In that moment, Kenichi resolved that he will be that someone who could keep pushing her forward, not just for the company, but for her own sake as well. And then, mid-swing, Reina suddenly lurched forward and vomited. Kenichi panicked, rushing to steady her. He urged her to wait, worried she might ruin her suit. The next morning at the office, Reina immediately noticed the bandage on Kenichi's forehead. She questioned him about it, but that only confirmed she remembered nothing about the night before. Without pressing further, she turned briskly on her heel and reminded him that it was time to prepare for the meeting. As the employees bustled to their places, Fujioka sidled up to Kenichi. In a hushed, breathless tone, he remarked that the boss seemed to be in a surprisingly good mood. She hadn't yelled at them once. His odd enthusiasm made Kenichi shift uncomfortably, especially as Fujioka's heavy breathing grew more noticeable. Across the room, Reina cast another glance at Kenichi. Her eyes lingered on the bandage again, a faint sense of unease stirring in her. Something about it didn't sit right with her, though she quickly brushed the thought aside as nothing more than her imagination. It had been half a year since Reina had taken over the company. By now, she had grown accustomed to the workload, but one problem still lingered: interpersonal relationships. There was still too much distance between her and her employees. A company couldn't function properly if everyone acted like they were walking on eggshells around their boss. Remembering the advice someone once gave her, it was okay to take things one step at a time, Reina decided to start small. She would exchange basic greetings with everyone. A simple good morning couldn't hurt, or so she thought. The attempt backfired almost immediately. Her naturally intimidating aura twisted what should have been a friendly greeting into something closer to a threat. Employees froze in their tracks, bowing stiffly and replying as though they had already done something wrong. Fujioka, watching from the sidelines, grew oddly excited, convinced the president was deliberately applying pressure. To him, her cold presence was strangely enticing, leaving Kenichi deeply uncomfortable. Kenichi, however, could see what was really happening. She was worried about being avoided by her employees, but her plan was backfiring horribly. When Reina turned her attention to him, Kenichi faltered. The contrast between her stern demeanor now and the memory of her drunken self at the park was too sharp. He remembered the vulnerable side she revealed after drinking, a side no one else could imagine. Only he knew that the imposing president who struck fear into her subordinates was also a woman who wants to be pampered. Back in her office chair, Reina reflected on her actions. Despite her attempts at greeting, the atmosphere seemed heavier than usual. She reasoned that perhaps she had been too direct, or maybe mornings were simply not the right time since everyone was still tired. Her doubts deepened when a bubbly young employee walked in. With a cheerful greeting, the room instantly shifted. The employees responded naturally, gathering around her with ease. The warmth and energy filled the space so effortlessly that it left Reina shocked. This was how it was supposed to look. As Kenichi and Fujioka responded easily to the bubbly employee's presence, Reina's gaze hardened, which made Kenichi uneasy. Later that night, while walking, Kenichi wondered about the strange expression he had seen on her face earlier. The president and an ordinary employee, they were the same age, yet even with the same greeting, the reactions from others had been starkly different. He couldn't shake the thought. As he made his way to the park, he hoped she wasn't drunk again. That hope vanished instantly. There she was, sitting on a panda spring rider, patting its head and calling it lucky for being too cute in such a cruel world. Before adding that she herself had no such cuteness. Empty beer cans lay scattered around her feet. Kenichi watched silently, unable to believe how much more depressed she seemed than he had imagined. The sheer amount of alcohol was staggering. When he finally asked if she was alright, she mumbled that everyone had called her ugly. Nobody had, of course, but Kenichi humored her, acting as though it was unforgivable to insult their own boss. She added that she wasn't going back there anymore. This sulking side of her was new to him. Then, in a drunken haze, she spoke his name. She accused him of averting his eyes when she greeted him, yet acting lovey-dovey when the cute female employee greeted him. She muttered about firing him. Panic washed over Kenichi. He quickly tried to redirect her, saying perhaps that Kenichi fellow hadn't avoided her out of dislike. She pressed him, asking why he was backing that employee up. Was he his ally? Completely unaware, of course, that he was that very employee. Struggling to keep his composure, he explained that it was only natural people would act more casually with regular coworkers than with the company president. He suggested that her very presence created a sense of tension, but that this was not a weakness. In fact, it was one of her greatest strengths as a leader. Hearing this, she flushed and seemed almost happy. She admitted that it wasn't as though she wanted to be fawned over, but the weary, distant reaction still hurt her, leaving her feeling sad, or perhaps even jealous. Kenichi couldn't help imagining how things might have been different if she were a regular employee like Hana. Without the burden of leadership, she would never have to put on a tough act. Her natural energy and intensity would have easily drawn people to her. But instead, she stood above others, and her title alone made people nervous to approach her. He tried to gather his thoughts, calling her name, stumbling to say what he wanted. He told her she should have confidence, that her face was pretty, her eyes, her nose, everything. He admitted that they hadn't known each other long, but her perseverance, despite her youth, was something to be admired. What he was trying to say was simple. For all the praise she never received at work, he would be the one to give it to her here, in this place. Even he wasn't sure where the words were coming from. But Reina only looked at him quietly and asked if that only applied in this park. Flustered, Kenichi asked what else she meant. She stood, clutching her phone close to her face, and shyly said she wanted him to praise her on Lime as well. They exchanged contacts. She was delighted, announcing that she would message him often and that he had better reply or she would get mad. Kenichi agreed, reasoning that if it eased her stress even a little, it was worth it. Glancing at her screen, she noticed his nickname, Zumi, and called it cute. Then, almost as an afterthought, she asked for his real name. Shock gripped him. If she discovered his identity as her subordinate, everything would unravel. She would never show her weakness to him again. She would wall herself off and shoulder everything alone. Panicked, he muttered the name Izumi, a clumsy cover, borrowing from his real surname, Ishizumi. She accepted it without question, then threw her arms around him, declaring that from now on, she would be in his care. Kenichi stood frozen. He realized he was edging dangerously close to a point of no return. The next day at work, Kenichi received a message from Reina. Remembering her warning that she would get angry if he didn't reply, he sat there staring at his phone, struggling to think of what to write back. Nothing came to mind. In the end, he gave up and simply sent a sticker. Just then, Fujioka appeared behind him without warning, peering over his shoulder and asking if it was from his girlfriend. Kenichi nearly jumped out of his seat in shock. His reaction was all Fujioka needed. He immediately assumed it was a bullseye. Kenichi, flustered, quickly denied it, insisting it was just a work message. Meanwhile, in her desk, Reina received the notification and opened it to find a hugging sticker Kenichi had accidentally sent. A wave of heat rose to her face as she stared at the screen, completely flustered. But before she could linger on it, Hana suddenly appeared at her side, handing over the documents she had requested earlier. Reina forced herself to compose instantly, her face hardening back into its usual mask of dignity as she accepted the papers with coolness. Hana walked away, smiling, convinced that the president was as calm and cool as always. Once she was alone again, Reina's composure wavered. She glanced back at her phone, trying and failing to stop the corners of her mouth from curling upward. She closed her phone and decided she would look at it again later. Days later, inside her apartment, Reina lay sprawled across her bed, happily texting with Izumi. She was delighted by how quickly he always replied. Just thinking back to the time she hugged him made her cheeks burn with embarrassment. The truth was, she could barely remember his face. She had been drunk, and the park had been too dark. but simply exchanging words with him about work eased the crushing stress of being president. That morning, she texted him about her employees, complaining that they talked behind her back and wondered aloud if she should just punch them. Izumi's reply came swiftly. Violence was no good. What she needed instead were allies. When she admitted she didn't know how to casually talk with her employees, Izumi suggested having a meal together. Eating, he said, made it easier for people to open up. Later that day, Reina decided to try it. At lunchtime, she carried her homemade lunchbox to the break room, pausing at the doorway. She watched her employees chatting from a distance, but her intense stare only unsettled them. To them, it looked like their president was silently glaring. The cheerful atmosphere shrank instantly into silence, everyone eating as if they were prisoners under strict supervision. Everyone except Fujioka, who seemed strangely thrilled to be under her gaze. Kenichi, noticing, suspected she was following the very advice he had given her earlier. She was probably just too nervous to step forward. He decided to take the initiative and invited her to join them. She accepted, trying not to show the happiness flickering across her face. When Kenichi noticed her lunchbox, he asked if she had prepared it herself. He remembered her earlier messages about wanting to stop eating only convenience store meals and become more of a role model. She had pushed herself to make it from scratch despite her busy schedule. But when she opened the lid, the contents resembled a horde of grotesque monsters straight from the depths of hell. Kenichi's mind instantly compared it to one of those manga disasters where cooking went horribly wrong. Reina immediately suggested throwing it away, but Kenichi, feeling guilty since it was his advice that drove her to this, intervened. He reasoned that appearances weren't everything, and that it was important to taste the effort she had put in. Declaring he wanted to try his boss's homemade cooking, he braced himself and took a bite. The flavor was indescribably terrible, a taste so chaotic his tongue felt like it was going numb. Fujioka, of course, demanded to try some too. After swallowing, he proclaimed the taste utterly agonizing, as though it had burned the very surface of his tongue, but he loved it. To him, it was a pure experience of suffering, and he asked for the leftovers. Reina seized him by the face as though preparing to crush it. Kenichi rushed to intervene, assuring her that Fujioka meant no harm. She relented just as Hana entered the room. Hana was delighted to see the president eating with them and quickly joined, unveiling her own homemade lunch. Her arrangement of food was colorful, cute, and clearly delicious. The other employees praised it enthusiastically. Kenichi worried Reina might react poorly, but instead she surprised everyone. Rather than scolding or belittling, she praised Hana's cooking skill and gently patted her head. Later that night, Reina was back at the park, drinking once again. Kenichi realized the lunch incident had bothered her more than she let on. What shocked him most was not her drinking, but the sight of the countless cooking appliances and tools scattered around her, evidence of a drunken shopping spree. She sat proudly among them, singing to herself that with these machines covering her like the armor of a Zagok, she already felt like she could cook. Kenichi approached, bewildered by the bizarre display. Reina, however, was more interested in explaining the Gundam reference than answering his question. She gushed about the amphibious mobile suit, round and cute in its own way, while Kenichi could only stare at the appliances littering the ground. Eventually, she admitted why she had bought them. She had followed his advice and joined her employees for lunch, and though she thought the socializing went fairly well, her cooking had been a disaster. The embarrassment was made worse because Hana, who excelled at cooking, had been there. She explained that at home her father had been overly protective, never allowing her to use knives, calling them too dangerous for her. She then recalled how Kenichi had eaten her ruined cooking as if it were delicious. To her, it felt like pity. That thought annoyed her so much that she had gone on this spree, determined to practice and one day serve him something truly tasty, only to prove him wrong. Kenichi felt a pang of guilt. Maybe he had paid too much attention to her, unintentionally making her feel worse. Reina quickly corrected herself, insisting it wasn't because she liked him or anything. She rattled off a list of complaints instead, that he was plain, too soft on his workers, stubborn, and hard to get along with. She had no idea that the very person she was criticizing stood right in front of her. Even so, Kenichi found himself quietly happy. Out of all the employees she oversaw, she still noticed the struggles of those at the lowest level. In that, she reminded him of her father. He commended her determination to challenge herself, to learn cooking even though she lacked confidence, and pointed out that she had already grown closer to her employees through her efforts. Reina's face softened into a smile, warmed by Izumi's praise. To Kenichi, she truly was someone who stands above for others, just like her father once had. When she asked him to help carry the boxes of appliances home, Kenichi immediately called for a taxi. At her apartment, he found himself weighed down not by the boxes, but by guilt. The lie he was living pressed heavily on him. What would happen if the truth came out? Still, if being Izumi eased her stress, then perhaps it was worth it. As Ishizumi Kenichi, he could never give her this side of himself, but as Izumi, he could support her in a way that mattered. Today's socializing had been a success, proof that there was meaning in continuing the charade, so long as he didn't make any mistakes. As he carried the last box inside, he heard the door click shut behind him. Turning, he saw Reina by the door, sliding the lock into place. With a playful grin, she stuck out her tongue and declared that she had caught him. Kenichi froze when the door locked behind him. There was no escape. Reina, her face flushed, told him to stay for a while. She explained, blushing even harder, that she only wanted to return the favor for all the help he had given her. She stressed that he shouldn't get the wrong idea, that this wasn't something she did with just anyone. In fact, this was the first time she had ever let a man inside her home. Kenichi, however, felt danger in every word. His only goal became escape. He brushed it off, saying what he had done was nothing worth thanking, and reached for the door. But before he could touch the knob, Reina grabbed both his wrists. Her voice cracked on the edge of tears. She asked him why he was leaving, if he hated her that much. Then, almost pleading, she wondered aloud if she wasn't cute enough for him. In desperation, she threatened to turn into a baby again before throwing her arms around him, begging him not to go. Kenichi tried to calm her, but instead she took him down with a sudden flying armbar, pinning him to the floor with startling precision. She told him flatly that she would not let him leave until he agreed to stay. Moments later, she finally relaxed, apologizing for making such a fuss, relieved that he had given in. Kenichi, on the other hand, was simply grateful his arm hadn't snapped under the pressure. One drink, he thought. Just survive one drink and then run. Reina teased that the position they were in looked a little lewd with their bodies stuck together in the dark. Kenichi immediately thought otherwise. Still, when she rose to switch on the lights, panic struck him. If she saw him clearly, she would recognize him instantly. The only reason his secret was safe was because of the darkness at the park. He quickly caught her wrist and, scrambling for an excuse, muttered that since they always met at night, he'd feel too shy to see her face in the light. It was the dumbest excuse he had ever given, but to his amazement, it worked. Reina blushed, fumbling her fingers, murmuring that it must be because she was too cute. They moved to the living room, settling in for drinks. Kenichi sighed with relief, thinking the worst had passed, but he was wrong. The mood felt more dangerous now. A dimly lit room, just the two of them, drunk. Despite his lack of experience, Kenichi knew exactly where such a mood could lead. Worse still, he felt something strange welling up inside himself. When he glanced at Reina, she too was blushing, clearly caught in the same atmosphere. He tried to change the subject, asking about her duties as president or if she had any worries. She brushed it aside completely, instead asking what type of girl he liked. Caught off guard, Kenichi answered vaguely, nothing in particular, which immediately made her sad. To fix it, he hastily added that he liked quiet but strong-willed girls. Her face lit up instantly, proudly declaring that it sounded just like her. Kenichi groaned inwardly at the ridiculousness of it all. Reina straightened up, her eyes shining mischievously, and asked what part of a girl's body he found most attractive. Kenichi, blushing, wanted nothing to do with this game. He repeated that he had no particular preference. Unimpressed, Reina began counting down, threatening once more to activate baby mode. Before he could respond, his eyes drifted to the kitchen. Unlike the rest of the spotless apartment, it was a complete mess. She had clearly worked hard preparing the lunch earlier, leaving no time to clean. The sight made him soften, so instead of resisting, he played along, answering that he preferred girls who weren't slim but voluptuous, even on the rounder side. Reina's eyes lit up with delight. She clung to his arm, pressing against him, asking if that made him happy. Her mood shifted again. She admitted that work still worried her, but that in this moment, she was having a blast. While whether they were together here or messaging in line, she felt she could become a normal girl, not just a company president. She said her work even felt lighter because of him. Hugging him tightly, she confessed that when he was with her, she could do her best, but when he was gone, she couldn't. Kenichi tried to dismiss it, saying what he'd done wasn't anything special, but she persisted, insisting he was wrong. Caressing his chest, she begged him to stay the night, just this once. Kenichi felt a sharp pang in his chest. At first, he thought it was guilt gnawing at him for deceiving her, but no, the pain wasn't in his chest at all. It was lower, churning in his stomach. His eyes widened as the realization hit him. The lunch she had made earlier, the one he'd eaten without complaint, was coming back to exact its revenge. Without a word, Kenichi bolted upright and dashed for the bathroom. The next morning, Reina buried her face in her hands, mortified by the memory of last night. Even if she had been drunk, she knew she had completely overdone it, coming onto him like that. The thought gnawed at her. What if he hated her now? She replayed the end of the night in her head. He'd suddenly clutched his stomach, said it hurt, and rushed out. At the time, she assumed it was just an excuse, that maybe he'd been put off by her behavior and bolted the moment he could. Her worry only grew heavier when she reached for her phone and sent him a message, only to be met with silence. Then, a soft ping echoed from the sofa. Reina froze. There, half hidden between the cushions, was a phone. His phone. Izumi had forgotten it. Meanwhile, at his apartment, Kenichi tore the place apart in search of his phone. Drawers, pockets, under the futon, nothing. The sinking realization hit him. He must have left it at his boss's place last night. Standing around wouldn't solve anything, so he dragged himself to work, his mind racing the whole way. If the boss had found it, then, sure, the phone was locked, but what if a notification popped up on the lock screen? What if she connected the dots? That he was Izumi. She'd fire him on the spot, feel betrayed, lose faith in humanity, and the company would collapse under the weight of her broken heart. A voice behind him suddenly called out, making him flinch. It was the president, looking at him curiously. To her, he probably looked like a weirdo just standing there in the way. He gave a clumsy excuse about admiring the building, and she only brushed it off before heading inside. For a second, Kenichi felt relieved. If she was acting normal, maybe she hadn't found anything. Maybe his phone wasn't even there. Then he saw it, sticking out of her blazer pocket. His phone. The relief vanished instantly, replaced with panic. Kenichi watched from a distance as Reina kept staring at his phone in her hand. It was bad enough being without it, but now she was distracting him even more. Before he could think of a plan, Kurokawa, the section manager, came over. She asked him to do her a favor, remind the president about the regular 2 o'clock meeting since she hadn't shown up yet. Kenichi asked why him, pointing out that Kurokawa could just tell her directly. But Kurokawa admitted she was too scared. The president was always on edge. Kenichi tried to say that Reina wasn't that unreasonable, maybe even approachable at times, but Kurokawa wouldn't hear it. She insisted Reina was simply intimidating. In the end, Kenichi agreed to go, though he was nervous himself. Meanwhile, Reina sat at her desk, feeling restless. Without messages from Izumi, she felt strangely lonely. Her mind kept going back to last night, how bold she had been, how embarrassing it was to come onto him like that. The thought made her blush, and she worried if Izumi hated flirty girls. Even so, just having something that belonged to him made her feel like he was close, watching over her. That thought, at least, she liked. Her daydreaming was interrupted when Kenichi suddenly appeared, with Kurokawa behind him. Caught off guard, Reina answered with an unfiltered baby voice. The unexpected cuteness shocked the entire office. Keyboards went quiet and everyone stared. Kenichi and Kurokawa were frozen in disbelief, while Reina realized too late what she had just said. Her face turned red, and in a desperate attempt to save her dignity, she forced her voice into its usual commanding tone, asking Kenichi and Kurokawa what they were looking at. She was still blushing furiously, making the act even more awkward. Kenichi quickly told her it was time for the meeting, but she cut him off, insisting that he hadn't heard anything. The veins in her forehead stood out as she glared at him with a frightening intensity. To Kenichi, she looked like a demon. He was sure if she ever learned he was Izumi, his life would be over. Reina then turned her glare on Kurokawa, demanding that she also pretend she hadn't heard a thing. Kurokawa, pale and trembling, nodded sheepishly, barely holding herself together. Later that night at the park, Reina was drunk again, crouched behind a bench as if trying to disappear into it. What happened earlier officially topped the list of her most embarrassing moments. When he approached and asked what was wrong, she mumbled like she was a bench now. Eventually, she confessed the truth. Earlier at work, she had accidentally slipped into her baby voice, the one she usually used only with him, and it mortified her that an older employee had heard it. The last thing she wanted was to look soft in front of her employee. Kenichi reassured her, saying it wasn't embarrassing at all. That side of her was actually cute, a softer glimpse of someone who always tried to look unshakable. He coaxed her to stop hiding, and when he added a question about whether she still had his phone, Reina perked up instantly. She popped out from behind the bench, making a silly splashing sound effect as she held up 2 cans of beer. Announcing herself as the goddess of the lake, she presented him with a choice, a can of Chuhai or a can of beer. Kenichi thought, shit. here we go again, and told her he just wanted his phone. Reina praised his honesty, then pulled out a highball to give him instead. Kenichi couldn't help but ask why it was all alcohol. When he politely addressed her as boss and asked for his phone back, she waved him off. She was no boss, she claimed, only goddess, and he should call her that. Reluctantly, Kenichi played along, calling her goddess, which made her flush red before she sank back behind the bench in embarrassment. He called her goddess repeatedly until she broke, insisting he call her something less humiliating like high 20ness, despite being the one who demanded the goddess title in the first place. Finally, when he pressed again for his phone, Reina said she'd only return it if he gave her something personal in exchange. Flustered, Kenichi asked what kind of goddess made trades like this. Blushing, she explained she just wanted something of his, no matter how small, something that belonged to him. Was that so wrong? He admitted it wasn't and dug around his pockets, but the only thing he had was an old fountain pen. The moment he showed it, she snatched it with both hands. Kenichi admitted, a little embarrassed, that it wasn't anything special, just a cheap pen he had. Even so, Reina seemed delighted, holding it close as if it meant the world to her. At last, she handed back his phone, promising she hadn't looked at anything. Relieved, Kenichi thanked her, but then she admitted she had at least checked if it vibrated in her pocket, just in case he got a message. That part made him uneasy, though her next comment stung worse. The phone hadn't buzzed even once. With that, she scampered off, calling it a relief that he didn't seem to have a girlfriend. Glancing back at him, cheeks burning, she said it was good news for her before waving goodbye. She promised they'd see each other soon, though she had an early date tomorrow. Later that night, back at his apartment, Kenichi finally checked his phone. His shoulders slumped when he realized how empty it was. No new messages at all, not even a stray notification. The last one dated back 2 weeks, but just as the weight of loneliness hit, a new message came through. It was from Reina. She had sent him a haiku. Kenichi stared at it, reflecting on the irony. The only person he messaged daily was his boss. Then her words from earlier echoed in his mind, that she was glad he didn't have a girlfriend. For the first time, he wondered if what he was doing was really for her sake anymore. Meanwhile, Reina lay in her bed, smiling softly at the screen as she reread Izumi's messages, her cheeks glowing in the dim light. In her sleep, Reina dreamt vividly of Izumi. In the dream, he pushed her down gently, confessed his love, and admitted he couldn't hold back anymore. He promised he'd do anything for her and asked what she wanted him to do. Flustered, Reina replied that she wasn't experienced, but what she really wanted was a long, warm hug. Izumi opened his arms and told her to come closer. Just as she was about to, she jolted awake, blurting out a muffled, "Ooh, woo! Izumi messed Reina up!" The realization hit her immediately. It had only been a dream. Her cheeks burned, and she buried her face in the pillow out of sheer embarrassment. For a brief moment, she even tried to fall back asleep, hoping to pick up where the dream had left off. But she changed her mind since she had work today. In the shower, the dream lingered stubbornly. She wondered if deep down she was just a hopelessly pervy woman. After all, whenever she got too drunk, she always ended up clinging to Izumi anyway. Still, it was better than the nightmares she used to have. Back when she first inherited the company, the whispers and doubt behind her back followed her everywhere, even into her sleep. Night after night, she dreamed of people sneering, laughing, waiting for her to fail. Those nightmares used to gnaw at her, making mornings a torment. But lately, they hadn't come back. And she admitted to herself with a quiet mutter as the steam wrapped around her that change had started ever since Izumi appeared in her life. At the office, Kenichi scrolled through his messages, staring at the latest one from Reina. She had casually mentioned she'd dreamed about him and even asked if he ever dreamed of her. His stomach tightened. What started as a harmless act, letting her vent under the assumption that he was an outsider, was snowballing into something heavier. She only opened up to Izumi because she believed he wasn't part of the company, someone safe she could lean on. But this secret couldn't last forever. If she found out the truth, the fallout would crush her. Maybe it was better to back away before things went too far. His thoughts were cut short when Fujioka suddenly loomed over his shoulder, nearly making him drop his phone. With a grin, Fujioka teased him about texting his girlfriend so early in the morning and leaned in to read the name. Kenichi panicked, practically diving to the floor to shield the screen. Fujioka only chuckled at the overreaction, brushing it off as unnecessary. Then, he asked if Kenichi too had discovered the joy of being in pain, just like him, and had thrown himself down on purpose. Kenichi froze, grabbed Fujioka's shoulder, and told him flatly that he had seen nothing. He repeated it firmly, until Fujioka gave a half-hearted nod. Fujioka still looked puzzled, muttering about how weird Kenichi was acting this early. Then, as if nothing had happened, he casually reported that he'd already updated the cloud progress sheet. That gave Kenichi pause. Normally, Fujioka was late almost every day. Curious, he asked why the sudden change. Fujioka answered with a straight face, because the president didn't hit him anymore. Kenichi blinked. Fujioka elaborated. Everyone had noticed that the president had gotten a little nicer recently. She hadn't lashed out once, and it made people wonder if something had changed. For him, if she wasn't going to hit him anymore, then there was no point in being late. It just wasn't the same. Kenichi could only stare. Fujioka, it seemed, was glitched beyond repair. Later in the break room, Kenichi was quietly filling his cup with coffee when he noticed Kurokawa step in. He greeted her and asked what brought her there. She explained that she was on her way to hand over the meeting minute to the president. Kenichi asked if she wanted him to go with her again. She still found the president intimidating. But then her tone softened, almost curious, as she brought up something else. That smile the president had worn the other day, what did he make of it? Kurokawa admitted she didn't think it was the kind of smile a bad person could make. In fact, she agreed with Kenichi's earlier impression. People all around the office had been saying the same thing. The president seemed more approachable lately. If that was the case, Kurokawa added, then she'd stop using people as human shields during meetings. Kenichi nearly choked on his coffee. She had been doing that the entire time? To him, it sounded less like caution and more like a level of paranoia he couldn't quite process. Later at her desk, Reina was bent over a stack of papers, carefully analyzing the numbers in front of her when Kurokawa suddenly approached. She handed over the summary and notes from the last meeting. Reina froze for a moment, almost in disbelief. Kurokawa was speaking to her directly. Normally, she relied on someone else as a go-between whenever there was business with the president. It struck Reina as odd. Kurokawa was not just any employee. She had earned her promotion to section manager and was one of the most respected women in the company. Reina had always assumed Kurokawa disliked her, maybe even hated her. Yet here she was, standing face to face. A small spark of hope flickered inside Reina's chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance they could be friends. She complimented Kurokawa's work and tried to smile, but her effort came off stiff and strained. From Kurokawa's perspective, it didn't look like a smile at all. It looked like a sneer. The thought unsettled her. Maybe the president really was scary after all. She quickly tried to wrap up the exchange. Reina, however, felt deflated. She wanted to continue the conversation, but it was slipping through her fingers. Just then, Hana appeared, cheerfully inviting Reina to have lunch together. Seizing the opportunity, Reina placed a hand on Kurokawa's shoulder and urged her to join them. Kurokawa hesitated. On one side was the boss everyone feared, and on the other was the company's ultra-girly junior. Compared to them, she felt like an out-of-place gloomy otaku. What could the three of them possibly have in common to talk about? Before she could resist further, the two had already pulled her along. From a distance, Kenichi watched the unlikely trio leave together. He recalled what Fujioka and Kurokawa had said earlier, that the president had changed, but he knew the truth. Reina hadn't changed at all. She had always been kind at heart. She was just weighed down by the burden of the company, and her awkwardness had made her easy to misunderstand. Later that night, Kenichi found himself reflecting. Reina's stress seemed to be easing bit by bit, and she was even starting to bond with the team. Manager Kurokawa could turn into a solid advisor, and Hana, being the same age as her, might become a close friend. For the first time, Kenichi felt like his job was almost done. Maybe she didn't need him anymore. That thought vanished when he discovered Reina drunk again, this time lying across the slide at the park, covering her face, mumbling that she wanted to die. Kenichi stood there, stunned, wondering what on earth had happened to reduce her to this state. She groaned that if she were ever reborn, she hoped she'd at least be this pretty again. Kenichi could only sigh at how openly smug she was being, even in her despair. He reminded himself that she was supposed to have eaten with the others today. Maybe it had turned into one of those delicate, girls-only talks. He tried calling her name, but the moment Reina noticed Izumi, she bolted toward him. With surprising force, she tackled him into the sandbox, clinging to him and sobbing his name over and over. When Kenichi asked what had happened, she admitted that she had lunch with the girls at work and completely bombed the conversation. In that moment, Kenichi finally understood what he'd been feeling all along. He could tell himself he was just doing this for her, but deep down, he knew he was a coward. Yet, he couldn't help but feel proud too. Reina trusted him with all her heart. He tried to reassure her, suggesting maybe she was just overthinking, but Reina shook her head and confessed the real problem. The topic at lunch had shifted to dreams. Everyone meant their dreams for the company's future, but Reina had misunderstood completely. She thought they meant literal dreams, so she went ahead and blurted out the lewd one she'd had that morning. Kenichi froze. It was worse than he imagined. Reina clutched her head and screamed, mortified that now everyone probably thought she was some pervy woman. Kenichi, however, made a decision. Enough of wallowing. He'd see this Izumi through to the end, until Reina found someone she truly loved, someone who could really support her. Trying to lighten things, he said it was just bad luck she happened to dream of that particular thing today. Then it hit him. Earlier, Reina had texted him saying she dreamed about him. Blushing, he carefully asked if she meant she'd had a lewd dream about him. Reina snapped him into an armbar, twisting his neck while shouting that she was not a pervy woman. Kenichi choked out protests, his face buried in the sand. Tears welled in Reina's eyes as she insisted it was all his fault anyway, for never doing anything mushy with her. Kenichi could only scream into the sand as the president reduced him to a helpless mess in the playground sandbox.